GOP leadership refuses to denounce Trump. This is still the party of Trump. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy making that crystal clear, dodging and twisting on questions about his phone call with Trump during the riot.
I was the first person to contact him when the riots was going on. He didn't see it. What he ended the call was telling me he'll put something out to make sure to stop this. And that's what he did. He put a video out later.
Quite a lot later. And it was a pretty weak video. But I'm asking you specifically, did he say to you, I guess some people are more concerned about the election than you are?
No, listen, my conversations with the president are my conversations with the president. I engaged in the idea of making sure we could stop what was going on inside the Capitol at that moment in time, and the president said he would help.
That is an altogether different tune from Leader McCarthy, like not even a track on the same album. Here's what he said in the wake of the January 6th Capitol riots.
Would you personally reach out to the president for more support?
I've already talked to the president. I called him. I think we need to make a statement, make sure that we can calm individuals down.
The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters. He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding.
But did you or did you not support Donald Trump's effort to overturn the election in Congress?
Didn't we just answer this the first time you asked it?
Joining me now, writer and editor for MSNBC Daily, Hayes Brown, and Christina Greer, Associate Professor of Political Science at Fordham University. You know, Hayes, McCarthy's comments part of a broader effort by Republicans to rewrite what happened on January 6th, the role the former president played, the responsibility he should bear. What, though, does McCarthy gain from carrying Trump's water? I mean, is this anything more than a survival tactic?
No, he gets to keep the speakership. I mean, or eventually he hopes to become Speaker of the House someday if the Republicans take back the House of Representatives. That's what he's hoping for. He hopes to not lose his job as minority leader by essentially following. He is following the trend. At no point has he really led the Republicans. He has always been about being the person that they can push around the most and get the least pushback from. And so in not getting rid of Trump, him and other Republicans, especially in the House, especially the ones who don't really seem to buy into Trump's lies, the ones who are just kind of going along to get along, they are basically, they know they've been caught in this big lie. They just don't know how to extricate themselves from it without saying, by the way, we lied. There's no way out of it that does not involve some kind of mea culpa, some kind of admission that, yeah, we knew this was a lie. And until they figure out how to do that or to take the plunge and face the voters and say, yes, this was not true, you should still reelect us because we believe in what you believe in. Until that happens, they are going to keep pushing this lie until they find a way out of this.
Dr. Greer, I spoke with Arizona Congressman Ruben Gallego about what is happening in his state. Take a listen.
This is a way for the Republicans to stage an issue so that way they could pass more voter suppression laws. This audit's a sham. Why would you hire anyone named cyber ninjas? And two, we actually aren't even clear who is totally paying for this.
Dr. Greer, connect the dots for us between what we're seeing in Arizona, the perpetuation of the big lie, the voter suppression bills we've seen across the country, including in Arizona, the anti-protest bills, and then what we are hearing from McCarthy and from others.
So here's the deal. You know, so many Republicans are still running scared because they don't know what Donald Trump plans to do in 2024. And they also know that, you know, he still has quite a powerful bully pulpit with primary voters within the party. And so there are a few things happening. One, as Hayes said, you know, they're just going to perpetuate a lie. But so many of their supporters actually don't care that they're perpetuating a lie. And they don't mind that they, you know, say one thing in the morning, another thing in the afternoon, and something totally different in the evening. The issue is this. Republicans need/want to regain control of the House and or the Senate in 2022, but definitely 2024. But the electoral math for the presidency for them, if we still have the Electoral College moving forward, just doesn't look good for Republicans. So they know that the only way they can win is to cheat. We know that we had organizations like Fair Fight that were actually legally helping people of all stripes register to vote. And Republicans know that they don't have a winning strategy. They're behind on climate change. They're behind on immigration. They're behind on education. They're behind on any policy issue. They are not with the vast majority of Americans and public opinion on guns, on schools, you name it. They're not there. And so with Donald Trump looming large in the shadows, you have so many elected Republicans who will do anything to try and present to him on a silver platter something for 2024 because they don't know what he's going to do. And if he turns against them, which we have seen him do to members of his own party, it spells disaster for them. So we've never seen someone do this to members of their own party, really eating off of their own young and also members within.
Dr. Greer, I want to stick on that point because not to get lost in the mixer, you have Liz Cheney describing Biden's policies as even further left than he campaigned on. But if you look at our new polling, voters approve of much of what this president is doing. I'm not sure how persuasive that argument is either.
Well, here's the interesting thing, though. We have to always remember that for a lot of Republicans, they only care about their primary voters, right? Because they know that if they can't get out of their primary, then it's done. And it's a short-sighted strategy because there's a Reuters poll that came out today that shows young Republicans across the country and Republican clubs across universities are saying, it's time to move on beyond Trump. You have to actually build a base and build a foundation within the Republican Party. And if you've got young people who believe in climate change and, they aren't climate deniers, they believe in the vaccine, and they also want to be strong Republicans, you can't have even more factions within the Republican Party because we've seen so many. It's just the Trump faction is the loudest and right now the strongest. But beyond primaries, the Republican Party really needs to figure out what they want to do with this faction if they want to survive as a party. Because you have a lot more independents, moderates, and weak-leaning Republicans who are saying, enough is enough. This is just blatant cheating. Where's the former president? He's not really saying or doing anything. The country actually was really divided under him racially and otherwise. So why don't we actually think about what Joe Biden is doing without this blind loyalty to Donald Trump and his version of the Republican Party?
Hayes, the fact that you have McCarthy changing his story about what transpired on January 6th, beyond the politics of it, I also think it begs a question about the need for a commission to study what happened on January 6th so that there is a historical and agreed upon record of what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been something that Speaker Pelosi has been pushing for since January 6th, basically. But what we're seeing is pushback from Republicans who know that the findings will probably not be in their benefit. They know that a full cataloging of the lead up to and the day of the attack will not make them look good. It will not play well politically. It will not be, no one wants to be blamed for in the 9/11 Commission report, which is basically what we're trying to recreate here. We're trying to have a full set of facts, a full record of what happened on January 6th. And I'm not surprised that Republicans aren't for it, but I am disappointed that they aren't for it. I'm disappointed that they aren't taking this chance to lay it all on the table and say, okay, here's what happened. Here's what we need to do as a Republican moving forward to make sure that we can actually do right by this country and fight for our ideals. Like, I don't get why no one in Congress seemingly is for this who is a member of the Republican Party. There are a few people like Liz Cheney and et cetera who really think that this is necessary, but they don't command the majority of their minority. And until they do that, until they can actually gather the will to say, no, we need to move on from Trump, we're not going to see any changes on that front.
Hayes, not surprised, but disappointed could be applied to so many different issues and questions. Hayes Brown, Christina Greer, thank you both so much.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.